Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to hold talks on Ukraine with US envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow tomorrow. This comes amid Zelensky's visit to Paris as he seeks to reinforce European support for Ukraine. Hong Kong police arrest a total of 13 people over the city's deadliest fire in decades after the blaze killed 151 people last week. The death toll is expected to rise further. Taiwan says test flights of US F-16V fighter jets will start this month, warning of very serious delays in delivery. This comes as Taipei is seeking to strengthen its defences to deter China. Airbus says that fewer than 100 A320 jets remain grounded for an urgent software update after issuing an alert last week that 6,000 aircraft were affected. And health authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo declare an end to the latest outbreak of Ebola, which has caused at least 34 deaths since August. Hello and welcome. Our top story is from South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa has hit back against attacks by the Trump administration. Ramaphosa has once again slammed the US for repeated white genocide claims. This comes after US President Donald Trump boycotted the G20 summit held in Johannesburg last month. Trump also said that he would not invite South Africa to the next G20 summit, that he plans to host at a golf course in Miami owned by his family. Reacting to Trump's remarks, President Ramaphosa downright rejected his threats in a televised address.
A few days ago, President Donald Trump made a statement to the effect that South Africa would not be invited to participate in the G20 in the United States. He repeated untrue statements about genocide against Afrikaners and the confiscation of land from white people in our country.
The South African president also said that the reasons the US gave for opting out of the latest G20 summit were based on false allegations about the African country.
As a country, we are aware that the stance taken by the United States administration has been influenced by a sustained campaign of disinformation by groups and individuals within our country, in the United States and elsewhere. These people who are spreading disinformation are endangering and undermining South Africa's national interests, destroying South African jobs, and weakening our country's relations with one of our most important partners.
In his address, Ramaphosa vowed that South Africa will continue to be an active member of the G20 despite the pushback by the Trump administration.
I must make it clear that South Africa is one of the founding members of the G20, and South Africa is therefore a member of the G20 in its own name and right.
Despite the growing friction between Washington and Pretoria, Ramaphosa said that South Africa was willing to continue to engage in dialogue with the US. South Africa has been on Donald Trump's radar since his return to the White House in January, be it the imposition of 30% tariffs on South African goods or repeatedly accusing the Ramaphosa government of discriminating against white Afrikaners. The US president has repeatedly claimed allegations of a so-called white genocide perpetrated by the country's black majority. Moreover, the dramatic showdown between Trump and Ramaphosa during a White House meeting in May took tensions to a new level. President Trump has been upset over South Africa's domestic and foreign policies. These include the black economic empowerment laws, which were introduced to redress the legacy of apartheid. Another point of friction has been South Africa's genocide cases against Israel, which is one of the staunchest allies of the US. In October, Pretoria said that it would continue the case against Israel despite the Gaza ceasefire. Irked by South Africa's policies, the Trump administration imposed high tariffs on the African country and has put any trade deal out of question. Not participating in the latest G20 summit and hinting at not inviting South Africa to the next one is yet another way for the Trump administration to express its discontent with South Africa's policies. Tensions between the two countries do not seem likely to settle anytime soon. And for more on this, we have with us Boitumelo Ben Senekwane, who is an associate professor at UNISA and political commentator, joining us live from Pretoria, South Africa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, and good day to your viewers.
Absolutely. I'd like to start off with, of course, Trump's statements relating to the G20. We heard Ramaphosa hitting back, but let's look at how Trump could actually stop South Africa from attending the G20 summit. How may that play out?
Look, in the real sense, South Africa is a founding member of G20. It shouldn't be, as per the arrangement of the G20, disallowed to attend any meeting G20 unless the G20 itself resolves as such, as a structure. But of course, we know that we are dealing with an abnormal situation where a sitting president of the United States has been bullying the world. So it will not be a shock that as much as South Africa has the rights, full rights to attend the G20, that when it arrives, South Africa delegation arrives in the US, they might be denied, for an example, the rights to land in the United States. Their visa arrangement might not be approved. So those are the tactics that might be used by President Trump, and he will argue that each and every country has the liberty to accept and accommodate whoever or decline whoever should visit the United States as a sovereign state.
And Boitumelo, I want to look at what Ramaphosa's next actions could be. We've had a fierce rebuttal against a lot of Trump's actions, whether it is those tariffs, whether it's claims of genocide against white Afrikaners, or whether it's the G20 fiasco that took play, of course, that boycott from the United States. What does President Ramaphosa do next other than hit back with words?
Look, the reality is that the South African strategy is limited as far as using political masses and military masses. It can only go as far as the summit is therefore closed.
Well, thank you to Boitumelo for joining us. This, of course, is an ongoing situation, and we will continue to bring you all of the updates in US-South Africa relations. Next, we head to Guinea-Bissau. The military have formed a government after taking control of the West African nation last week. But as the junta consolidates power, condemnation of the coup widens. The junta this weekend tapped 28 people, including five army officers and 4 women, to run the country. But this came as the African Union suspended Guinea-Bissau with immediate effect, reiterating a zero tolerance on unconstitutional changes of government.
The African Union immediately suspend the Republic of Guinea-Bissau from participating in all activities of the Union, its organs and institutions, until constitutional order is restored in the country.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres expressed grave concern. He strongly condemned the coup, calling for the immediate and unconditional restoration of constitutional order. Major General Horton Tam, who was sworn in as the country's transitional president and the nation's new prime minister, remained defiant following the formation of the new government.
Firstly, rigor, and discipline in managing what we have in common, particularly public funds. Secondly, the fight against corruption and drug trafficking. Zero tolerance for this scourge.
It is with a strong sense of responsibility that we today assume our role as members of the transitional government of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. This is an executive body established under the authority of the Military High Command for the restoration of national security and public order, whose patriotic mission is to temporarily lead the governance of our country in the current circumstances.
The military seized power a day before the provisional results for the November 23rd presidential election were to be announced. Their power seizure was justified as a counter to a plot by drug lords to capture the Guinean democracy. Major General Horta Ntam was sworn in as the country's transitional president. He is considered to have been close with ousted President Zamaro Sissoko Embalo in recent years. And while Embalo claimed victory in the pre-coup election, so did the opposition. And the opposition, along with political figures from Senegal and Nigeria, have hinted at the coup potentially being staged, a move they allege helped allow the government to retain office. The military suspended the electoral process, blocking results of the election, and the main opposition party said their headquarters were invaded by a heavily armed militia. Meanwhile, clashes broke out between young people and police in the capital's suburbs. Now, away from Guinea-Bissau, ousted President Embalo arrived in the Republic of Congo. Having been briefly arrested on the day of the military takeover, Embalo left the country to Senegal. But from there, he appears to have since arrived in Brazzaville on a private jet, according to a source close to the Congolese government. Embalo is rumoured to be close with the Congolese president. The situation in Guinea-Bissau, even ahead of this coup, was difficult. Crippling poverty, chaotic administration and political turmoil have made the country the perfect breeding ground for corruption and drug smuggling. Some analysts have dubbed the country a narco-state, with accusations that some senior politicians and military officials may be involved in the hard drugs trade. And this latest coup is the fifth since the nation's independence from Portugal in 1974. Several other attempts had been foiled. The new leaders have called for a one-year transitional period, but international pressure is mounting as domestic tensions continue to increase in one of the continent's poorest nations. We will continue to monitor the developments in Guinea-Bissau and beyond as the junta look ahead at this time of uncertainty. Moving on now to Nigeria. Just days after President Tinubu announced the nationwide emergency over a surge in kidnappings, the country has been hit once again by a similar crime. At least 26 people were abducted in total in two separate incidents over the weekend. The attacks happened in Kogi and Sokoto states. In Kogi, armed men stormed a remote church during the Sunday service. They abducted a pastor, his wife and several worshippers. A day earlier, on Saturday, in the northeast state of Sokoto, another gang struck the village of Chacho. 14 people taken in one single night. Those who were kidnapped include a bride, 10 bridesmaids, a baby and 2 others. Chacho was attacked in October earlier this year. 13 villagers were kidnapped then, with abductors demanding ransom for their release. And the fear is the same cycle is starting yet again.
It's not a business. It's not a business. When you say you kidnap somebody and you are requesting money from them, is that not a business? How do you want to stop that? So the government has to do more.
And these kidnappings are happening while Nigeria is already under a state of emergency. To fight these abductions, Tinubu has already ordered the hiring of 50,000 new police recruits. He has also redeployed police VIP bodyguards to regular policing duties. And still, the numbers keep rising. In Kwara State, police say 10 people were kidnapped on November 24th. 5 children and a pregnant woman were among them. Gunmen believed to be herders opened fire before leaving with hostages. In Niger State, more than 265 students are still missing after a mass kidnapping last week. More than 300 students and teachers were taken from a Catholic school on November 21st. Around 50 escaped, but hundreds still remain unaccounted for. On Friday, parents of those missing in Niger State reported the names of the missing children to local police.
The government and the public need evidence of the fact that children were actually adopted, so that the world will know that we will not just make up numbers or frame up numbers or names, that this is actually what is happening. They need our attention to come and ask us to investigate us, or how many children do we have, and that is the reason that we came here, to come and to tell the name of our children and also the location where we are.
In less than 10 days, the country has recorded 5 major kidnappings from Kebbi, Kwara and Zamfara. Hundreds still remain missing, with no group taking responsibility for the abductions. And locals say this is now a national trauma unfolding in real time.
I was sad. I felt betrayed. I felt like our government are not doing the right thing. I just feel so bad. Because this is like history repeating itself.
And the fallout from these kidnappings is now global. Over the weekend in Madrid, hundreds protested outside the Nigerian embassy, demanding protection for Christian communities.
Half of Christians representing Nigerian Christians here. Please save the lives of Christians. So please, we're calling for the international body. Please intervene and do something as it regards the killings of Nigerian Christians.
And many international figures have already raised concerns on the alleged persecution of Christians in Nigeria. US President Donald Trump has accused the country of committing, quote-unquote, a Christian genocide. Rapper Nicki Minaj has also backed his claims, calling for protections of Christians in Nigeria. The Nigerian government says both Muslims and Christians have been victims of armed kidnapping, and bandits don't target people of a particular faith. Nigeria is a nation of 230 million people. It has a notorious history of kidnappings, but many say they have never felt this unsafe, and this moment surely feels different. We'll bring you the latest as things develop. And our final story, across the border from Nigeria. In Niger, a different kind of confrontation is brewing up. It's about the country's vast reserves of uranium and who gets to control it. Niger's junta have announced that they are putting their uranium from the Somer mine on the open market. Somer, once majority controlled by French nuclear giant Orano, was nationalised by the junta in June, stripping Orano of any control. Orano says uranium has already been removed from the Somer site without its consent. It's calling the move illegal and a breach of an international ruling issued in September. The ruling barred Niger from selling or facilitating the transfer of any uranium produced by Somer. The company also warns of further action, including criminal proceedings if this material is diverted or sold in violation of its rights. At the centre of all this is a deepening conflict between France and Niger over who controls this resource. Orano says nearly 1,500 tons of uranium are still sitting inside its Somer site. But Niger says Orano extracted far more than its share over the years, more than what was agreed upon, and now they want their resources for themselves. The junta is already courting new uranium buyers: Russia, Iran and Turkey. And that set off alarms in Europe, because a quarter of their uranium resources come from Niger. Niger's fallout with France has been building for months. Recently, Paris accused the junta of preparing to sell 1,000 tons of uranium to Russia, a deal worth roughly $170 million. France fears nuclear shipments could easily be intercepted across Sahel, where several insurgent groups operate. They also say such a sale could fuel Moscow's war efforts by arming their nuclear supply chain. And Russia has been waiting for an opening just like this. Moscow has already expanded their nuclear cooperation deals with Mali and Burkina Faso. And last month it signed one with Niger, covering reactors, fuel supply and power plants. Niger's shift is part of a broader realignment inside the alliance of Sahel states. Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger have all adopted aggressive policies. They're asserting state ownership of gold, uranium, oil and rare minerals. All three countries have also signed defence deals with Russia as they drift away from pro-West sentiment. For decades, Niger exported uranium, but relied on coal and electricity imported from Nigeria to power its own grid. When Nigeria cut exports this year, Niger's grid collapsed by up to 50%. The country is one of the world's biggest producers of uranium, so Niamey's logic is simple. If you are sitting on one of the richest uranium belts in the world, why stay dependent on others for electricity? For now, it's yet to be seen if Russia capitalizes on the opportunity. But the reality on the ground across Sahel is simple. Anti-West sentiment is growing, and Russia is stepping in, ready to fill the vacuum. That's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. India's winter session of Parliament opens, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi urging lawmakers to ensure